Oh, yes, welcome aboard. This is the Passball Show, as always, brought to you by JohnPielli.com. I'm, of course, John Pielli, happy to be with you on this Thursday, the 21st day of December, as we are now 4 days away from Christmas, and there's still a lot of stuff we want to try to get close to and finish before we get to celebrate our holidays, and obviously not everybody celebrates Christmas, so for those who don't, happy holidays. And hope, as we've spoken about on the show a couple times, you take a couple of the messages that I've been trying to send over the last couple days. Because we think of the holidays as something that's very special, a great opportunity to bring our families and those that we love close to us. And I think it's something that's easily said, but when it comes down to it, there are a lot of people that are struggling. There's a lot of people that are feeling down about the time of year. A lot of times the holidays become a burden for somebody. And because of that, I think we have to be conscious of that, because a lot of that isn't seen on the outer parts of our skin. It's not something that we see in day-to-day life when we work with somebody every day, or we see somebody that we're friends with, or family members. We are able to put a front on, and I think a lot of people are able to do that. They're able to put almost like a masking of what they're really feeling inside, and inside they're hurting. Inside they are looking at the holidays as a burden, and may on the outside feel like, because of the perception of others, and as adults we're able to make it seem as if everything is okay. So I think it's very important that, in addition to spending time around loved ones and shooting the you-know-what and catching up and getting those precious gifts, which, by the way, we know a lot of the gifts that are given around the holiday season are just kind of not a lot of thought behind it. I'm getting a gift just to say that I got somebody a gift. So in addition to all of that, I think we need to spend some time and have more conversations. And one of the messages that I've tried to get out on the Passball Show, since we've gotten to the point where we're doing it every day during the week, is that we need to have more conversations with each other. We have to have more discussions, ask more questions. And for those of whom are struggling and are looking at the holidays as a little bit of a burden, let's put an arm around them. Let's make sure that we know that they have a voice and an ear and a shoulder to listen and have more of a discussion. Because you know what? It's so easy to go out there in a holiday gathering and have a big smile on your face and enjoy the time, eat those potato chips, have that dinner, and smile and talk about how beautiful each other's kids are. But it's harder to have that deep-rooted conversation where you say, how are you? And not how are you in a rhetorical sense where it answers its own question, where you're just saying it for the sake of saying it. But how are you really? And let's talk and let's have that conversation. Once again, the end of December, the highest ratio of suicides in this country happened towards the latter part of December, when everything comes to a head, where somebody that has not had the best of a year starts to digest everything and thinks about those family gatherings and says, I don't know if I could put on that smile while I'm around the other adults. And rather than do that, maybe I want to cause harm to myself. And it's something that has to be thought about. And we have to be more conscious of that and be around and care about each other. But not only that, just show a little extra in the latter couple weeks of December than we do throughout the rest of the year. Rather than ask that rhetorical question of how are you, not fine, thank you. No, how are you really? A couple things I want to hit up today, and we'll take some calls as we get towards the second part of the show. Unfortunately, I didn't get the phone charged, but I do want to talk a little bit about something that bothers me in baseball. And we'll get into this, and I'm going to get a little animated when I talk about this, but I'm going to kind of tease it here by saying we talk about baseball teams the way they're set up, and we put so much emphasis on the age of players. And it does happen in other sports. There is some truth behind it that you talk about as a player gets older, they depreciate. But when we start to look at an age, whether it's 32, 35, 38, whatever age you want to talk to in baseball, we seem to play by the numbers and not look at the individual players and what we're talking about. And I'm going to touch on that a little later because I do have some issues that I have with that way of thinking and that judgment that's put behind it. But I'm going to start out by talking about a site that I've brought up on this show before. And the reason that I'm bringing this up again is because, in all honesty, I want to see this way of sports coverage succeed because I believe it is on the cutting edge. When we think about things that involve sports, what goes around it? You think of, in some cases, alcohol, having a beer, watching a game, eating some chicken wings, maybe over at your local Hooters, watching some beautiful woman that's waiting on you. And I think you put that all together and you have what has become Barstool Sports. And I believe in it. And I believe I believe in its idea, and I believe in what it stands for. The problem is the disorganization that's going on with this site and its site's management may very well destroy its credibility before it has a chance to do what it's wanted to do. And I think we live in an age now in 2017, and I'm not the biggest advocate of this, but I'm willing to accept it for what it is. The FCC, its impact in the world of entertainment and in the world of media is kind of falling away to the wayside. And I believe in radio and television the way it stood years ago, where the FCC had a very big impact on the world of entertainment. And we're not just talking about sports, we're talking about entertainment in general. For the person that is watching a television show or listening to a radio program, the strong sexual natured conversations and profanity in general has been something that has been, kind of not looked at in a positive light. And I respect that. I respect where entertainment has gone for a series of years. But now in the year of 2017, I'm willing to accept that there's more of a forum in the world of social media where people use profanity in things that they post in regards to Facebook and Twitter. So when we're watching a game on television, we still have FCC regulation. When we listen to a program on the radio, we are still at a point where we can't use profanities, and we have to watch the nature of our conversations before it would get to a point where we have to worry about advertisers and sponsors and, perhaps a small outcry from a faction of the public. What Barstool Sports is representing is the day and age where the FCC has kind of taken a back burner. And from that part of what they're doing, I respect it. If somebody wants to send a message out on Twitter and use a profanity, odds are they're not going to lose their Twitter account now. And if somebody is speaking in a passion when they're talking about a sports topic and wants to use a profanity, they have that forum to be able to use it in 2017. So Barstool Sports is kind of that image of the person that's at a sports bar, that's using profanities, that's maybe making sexual natured comments if they want to. Locker room talk, right? And we talk about part of society that has accepted locker room talk on social media, in Facebook and Twitter, but the other side where we're ultra sensitive, we're taking every little word that's said and using it against somebody every way that we can. So it's something that is out there, and you know what? It does need a forum. And while we look at the other side that is very regulated and wants to study every word said and take it to the nth degree, even in some cases when it's not necessarily true, there's a forum for the other side, that quote-unquote locker room talk. The people that want to use profanities when they're at a sports bar drinking a beer. And I respect what Barstool Sports is trying to do. The problem that I have, and I hope there's somebody there that could take this message, because I mean it in the most positive way possible. You have to get your act together. About a month or two ago, there was a story reported during the baseball playoffs that Adrian Gonzalez was on a family vacation. And it was reported by Barstool Sports. Obviously, if he was on a family vacation while his team was competing in a World Series, it would be an absolute embarrassment to Adrian Gonzalez. And obviously, once that story's put out there, you think of everything bad you could say about Adrian Gonzalez. You talk about the time of the 2012 Boston Red Sox when they completely quit on Bobby Valentine. You could say his reputation for being a clubhouse lawyer. All that stuff was brought out, but it was brought out in an unnecessary way because the story was not true. And I hope that the management at Barstool Sports can step up to the plate, and if it's something that they can't fix on their own, it might be time to bring in some people that are a little more professional and are going to make sure that the stories that are being reported and put out there are accurate. Because today you got a person from Barstool Sports that's reporting that the Chicago Cubs have just about signed Yu Darvish. And you know who refutes that story? Yu Darvish himself on Twitter. He puts out hashtag fake news. So if you want to be taken seriously, which, by the way, number one, you have a strike against you because of your approach. And I'm not disagreeing with the approach. I think there's a forum for it. I think there's a forum for the guy that's at the bar, wants to have a couple beers and throw a couple profanities out there while talking to each other about what they feel about beautiful women. There's a market for that. But when you have your trust and the faith that others can have in you tarnished by bad reporting, you're setting yourself up for failure. And I personally want to see this forum of sports talk succeed, because there's a place for it. And I've said all along that sports in general are the biggest way and forum to hide from what's going on in the real world. You watch the World Series, and the World Series between the Dodgers and the Astros will go down as one of the most entertaining World Series at least in my lifetime. Yeah, I can't talk about the 1914 series between the Boston Braves and the Philadelphia Athletics. I'm not even old enough to talk about the Miracle Mets of 1969. But I tell you, in recent World Series history, it was one of the most entertaining World Series that I've ever seen. What the backdrop of it, watching that type of excitement, and the same happens with all other sports, you're able to at least take a temporary break from the monotony and the negativity that's out in the world today. Barstool Sports has a chance to be on the cutting edge because they're taking it a step further. They've accepted what a lot of us have accepted in 2017, that the FCC doesn't really need to regulate all entertainment. And there could be a forum for somebody that wants to talk about sports and maybe use a little bit of profanity. And they want to talk to a model, a beautiful woman, and get a sense into what it's like in the environment that they have. For those things, I think Barstool Sports is good. their reporting sucks. And if it's a matter of them going out there and actually hiring some decent reporters that are going to get the actual facts to a story before they report it, or maybe being a little harder on the reporters that they have, they're going to have a tough time. Because right now, the backlash isn't against what they stand for. The backlash is against their terrible reporting. And is that what Barstool Sports wants to be remembered for? Because somebody along the lines had a great idea, and it says it in its name. The fact that there's people that don't want to be regulated by the FCC, that want to watch a game on a big screen with a beer in their hand and maybe throw a little profanity out there. And you know what? There is a market for that. But unfortunately, there's some disorganization that exists. And I don't know if it's all the way at the top. I don't know if it's just at the level of the reporters. But the backlash isn't against what it stands for. The backlash is against how serious can you take Barstool Sports. Because if their reporting sucks, how are you going to trust anything that they say? And you know what it may open up the door for? It may open up the door for some competition. Somebody may take their idea and say, you know what? It's a good idea. Let me come up with a competitor for Barstool Sports where we'll forget about the FCC and we'll have people that want to talk sports, drink a beer, use some profanity, enjoy the sight of some beautiful women. But you know what? Do it in a professional manner. Have some actual reporters that do the work that's taken to report a story. Because if you're not going to do that, you're not going to last very long in this kind of industry. Imagine if somebody tried to do that with the news. There was a bunch of locker room kids that were sitting there, and they wanted to run their mouth and throw some profanity, but did it in such a disorganized way that the message of none of their stories were taken for what they were, because they could never be taken seriously. And I hope this message goes out there, because I want to see Barstool Sports succeed. Right now, it's not. Right now, they've invested a lot of money in their website and their content, but their reporting is garbage. They screwed up the Adrian Gonzalez story. Somebody thought they took a picture of Adrian Gonzalez in some different country, maybe Italy or something, but it was somebody that looked like Adrian Gonzalez. Because after the game in question, Adrian Gonzalez was part of the post-game show in L.A. And some clown decides to report that Yu Darvish has signed with the Cubs. And Yu Darvish is tweeting when he doesn't even know the English language. Hashtag fake news. Get your act together. Because if you can't do that, you're not going to last. And I tell you, at the very least, you're going to open up other people that could possibly compete with you, that are going to do it in a professional manner, that are going to hire real reporters, and aren't going to screw up stories like Barstool Sports is doing. Moving on, we're going to talk a little football, a little basketball later, but I do want to kind of, while I'm a little bit heated right now, get another thing off my chest that's kind of bothering me in regards to the world of baseball. And I teased it once we started a program, and it was something that got brought out in a show on MLB Network that just kind of reminded me about it. You know, we look at players that have an age to them. And that age in baseball could be 32, it could be 35, it could be 38, but whatever age that is, we start to say, hey, this player is on a downside of their career. They're no longer the superstar that they were a couple years ago. I just mentioned Adrian Gonzalez. Adrian Gonzalez is a player that is towards the latter part of his career. If you look at his performance on a baseball field in 2017, it was nowhere near what it was for the past 10 or 12 years when he was a bona fide all-star, when he was a legitimate first baseman that could do it all around, plays good defense, was considered in some cases a good leader. Right now, at this stage of his career, he is not the same. And you know what? That's okay. Players at some point get a little bit older. Their impact on the field, what they could bring to the table, is a little bit less. But the problem that I have, and it goes back to the people that I'm trying the best I can to respect, but it's people that don't know baseball that are looking at a series of numbers and are going to tell you based off of these theorems and these numbers exactly what a player is and exactly what a player's value is going to be towards, in the course of a given season. And it got thrown out there again yesterday when there was discussion about the San Francisco Giants trade for Evan Longoria. Now, we can have our opinions, and there's nothing wrong with them. Everybody's entitled to their opinions. But when the reasoning that you have to come up with the opinions that you have is a little bit flawed, it needs to be called out. And if you're staring at a computer screen, judging numbers and judging trends, and you're going to say that the Giants made a bad trade to add Evan Longoria just because of his age, that doesn't really fit in baseball discussion. And you know what it's doing? It's making me root for Evan Longoria and the San Francisco Giants. And I hope that their approach of what they're doing can lead them to another strong run in the postseason. Because this is a team that's not that far away. You look at Madison Bumgarner. You look at Johnny Cueto. Jeff Samardzija. They have some very good pitchers. They have Buster Posey, who's an MVP. They just added Longoria. This is a team that finished, of course, with the second worst record in all Major League Baseball, but did it in a season where nothing went right for them. So rather than go the typical route where people that study the numbers will say to go, trade all your top players, replace them all with players that are 25 years of age or younger. While it's worked in some cases, it's also not worked in other cases. And you have to understand that what makes the chemistry of a team work and what makes the moves that a team makes in the offseason or the overall product of a team work depends on each individual players. And we don't have this discussion enough. It's always one way or the other. Did a team spend the money that it takes to upgrade its roster? Or did a team invest enough in its farm system to have the top 5 prospects in all of baseball that are all going to come up at once and make this team into a juggernaut? It's either one end or the other. But we fail to factor in the individual players on the team. Because some players at age 35 or 36 are better than a quote-unquote top prospect when they're 23 or 24 years old. But we don't have this discussion. It's all about what team is spending the money or adding to its payroll by either trading for or signing big free agents. Or what team has the best prospects in the minor leagues, which, by the way, we haven't seen them play in the major leagues yet. So it is a bit of an unknown. We could talk about scouting. We could talk about the study of younger players in the minor leagues and what we could expect from them in the future and their projections. But we're not going to be able to see it until they actually play a major league game. So why can't a team, if they decide to, make the decision over what kind of resources they want to use themselves? If you had a bad year in 2017, does that mean that you have to bring 5 or 6 players that happen to be 23 or 24 years old onto your team just to say that you're younger? And let me ask my statistically inclined friends this question. Are there numbers that say that just because you're 23, 24 years old, that player is automatically going to project and that team is going to get better because those players that happen to be on the team are younger? In some cases it may work, but in others it don't. There are plenty of teams in Major League Baseball that can't get out of their own way. They have younger players. They continue to bring in player after player that's 22, 23, 24 years old. And when they do that, it doesn't necessarily work. So when we're talking about teams that hit that rebuild button and go back years, for years and say, listen, it's not going to work this year. It's not going to work next year. It might start to work in year 3, but by year 4, we're going to have a competitive baseball team on the field and hopefully be able to sustain it for the next 5 years. How many teams have tried that and failed? I know a lot of stock has been put into the Houston Astros and what they did this year. The fact that they were on the cover of Sports Illustrated in 2014 with a picture of George Springer saying that they are the 2017 World Series champions and 2017 comes and they win the World Series. It doesn't mean that every team has to operate that way. What it's not factoring in is how many teams have done that and failed. How many teams have done that and had to go through a complete regime change where their general manager and their manager and their team president didn't make the right decisions or made decisions that they thought were right at the time but didn't work out for them. Of course, they paid for it with their job. They changed the faces but still didn't work out. We could talk about the New York Mets. The New York Mets are in a situation that's pretty similar to that. Should they rebuild? They're probably a player or two away from being able to compete, at the very least, for a wild card spot in 2018. But it looks like, from an ownership standpoint, they don't have the funds. Or they may not have the ability to bring in those 2 players, and they may only be a player or 2 away. But what does that mean? Do they throw the you-know-what against the wall and see if it sticks? Because what happens if the Mets lose another 90 games in 2018? And you know what? They're a little closer to that than some people may think. I know you got the pessimistic Mets fans that are out there that are thinking that, that there's a dumpster fire going on every day and the world's about to end. And that's the way they go on with their day in and day out life. But for the objective fan out there, I think it's about 50-50 over whether the Mets improve in 2018 or stay where they were in 2017. Sure, you got Jacob deGrom and you got Noah Syndergaard, Yoenis Cespedes, Michael Conforto. You got a pretty good core there, but a core that over the course of the last couple of years has not been able to stay healthy. DeGrom was great last year. He battled an injury the year before. You say the Mets should build on their bullpen a little bit. Okay. Juris Familia, A.J. Ramos, Anthony Swarzak, Jerry Blevins. Okay. It's not that bad. They can use another reliever, though. And when it comes to their offense, the way their lineup is configured right now, it's hard to see them getting any better results than they had last year. Remember, when 2017 started, they still had the power bats of Jay Bruce and Lucas Duda and Curtis Granderson. They also had Neil Walker. Jose Reyes was a bench player. They had some depth coming into the season. Remember, none of those players are on the team right now. So, at some point, you would figure that they needed to add at least one more impact bat to that lineup. Now, the reports that are going out there now, they're saying that the Mets supposedly only have about $10 million more to spend. Is a little bit scary. Because if they only have about $10 million more to spend in regards to payroll, they're in a tough spot. You're talking about what position on the field as we hit the halfway point here on the Pass Ball Show. John Pielli with you. This is Thursday, the 21st day of December, 2017. We got the phone lines open if you want to call and join the show. 732-364-3598. That's 732-364-3598. Get you up here. Honestly, no filter. I got no filter, so I'm not going to FCC regulate you. Join the program if you want. But talking about the Mets, if there's going to be, and you could say that very legitimately, they could use 2 more bats in the middle of their lineup. An outfielder and a second baseman or a third baseman. So an outfielder or an infielder, at least about $10 to $12 million each. If this team wants to compete with the likes of the Los Angeles Dodgers and the Washington Nationals and the Chicago Cubs. But reportedly, they're limited to $10 million. They also need another reliever. We're talking about bullpenning and talking about the game as it exists right now being shortened. It's great to have DeGrom. It's great to have Syndergaard. But your 3, 4, and 5 starters, whether they're Matz or Harvey or Lugo or Zach Wheeler or Robert Gesellman or a free agent pitcher to be named later, odds are these are all pitchers that are coming out of the game in the 6th inning, after 6 innings, maybe in the 5th inning. They need to build a longer bridge. And that could probably cost you about $8, $9 million a year, probably on a multi-year contract. Now, if you want to talk about Moneyball and being able to use what I said before, the numbers people, the stat geeks, and put those percentages in there and come up with, Scott Hattebergs and, Chad Bradfords, and all of a sudden find use for them and have them overachieve. For every time that works, it fails because those players are in that echelon for a reason. You may be able to plug a player that could have a high on-base percentage in a certain spot. And I spoke about a couple days ago about free agency in baseball, why there's so limited movement right now is because the need for that star caliber player is being supplemented with players that are hitting 20 home runs. They may be hitting 230, but they're hitting 20 home runs and driving in 80 runs, and they're getting on base at a 320 clip or a 330 clip. I talked about the stat the other day, which is the difference between on-base percentage and batting average. Shows somebody's walk rate. It shows somebody's ability to get on base without getting a base hit. All things that we've seen have value in baseball. And the value of that has been brought to the forefront, and it is supplemented in some cases the need to bring in players that happen to make $20 million or $25 million a year. Their numbers are being supplemented by players that are worth a lot less, that you could get for $1 or $2 million, that you may be able to get and accept their shortcomings, but get a similar production that's pretty close to what the players that are making $20, $25 million are. And that's why free agency hasn't kicked off yet. Sure, some of it had to do with Giancarlo Stanton. Teams were waiting to see where he ended up. And certain teams were waiting to see how much of a chance they had to add him. Shohei Ohtani, his ability to both pitch and hit, appealed to everybody. And obviously he ends up with the Angels. So teams that were interested, the Seattle Mariners, the Chicago Cubs, the San Diego Padres, all teams that consider themselves finalists, are pivoting in another direction. They're looking to see what it is that they can get. because they're not going to get Ohtani. So the ability to go out there and get the type of players by just spending money is not as necessary as it used to be. So back to the point that I was making before, because it's very important that I get this point out there. I respect the Princeton or the Yale or the Harvard graduate that studies statistics and minors in sports management. But there is an eye that needs to still be there for those that watch the game and know the game. And if you know the game of baseball, your opinion should matter as much as it did 10 years ago. Unfortunately, it doesn't. Jobs that used to go to scouts, people that studied and understood projections, understood what they were looking at on a field, whether they're watching high school or college or a pro game, and looking at a player and thinking down the road, all right, if we do this, if we get this person in this kind of environment, they can extrapolate and be a little bit better and be more of an asset. The need for that scout is going away, and it's scary. And I tell you, I've had a chance to speak with a lot of scouts as early as last week when I was down at the Orlando Baseball Winter Meetings. And I tell you, the knowledge that they have about baseball, you can't put a computer program together or a formula that can teach that. And any team in baseball that is going real high with their analytics approach and wants to have it replace scouting, down the road is going to fail. And that needs to be understood. Do numbers matter in baseball? Do formulas matter in baseball? Of course. The statistics, the way they've been set up, I've found fascinating since I was 6 years old. How a batting average from one player can change from a year to another year to another year. You know, how a player can drive in a certain amount of runs. Now as we look at the analytical stats, the wins above replacement that judges a player as a hitter, as a fielder, as a base runner, and puts it all together. It's not my favorite stat, but I sure as heck respect it. Looking at weighted runs created, OPS plus. You know, looking at different stats, ERA plus, the way that you could take certain stats and factor in the effects of a ballpark, making every ballpark, even though they're all different, the same over one stat. I find that stuff fascinating, and I know it needs to exist in baseball because we have the technology. We have many smart people that are able to use numbers like that to scout players and judge what we call projections. We can't get away, unfortunately, from the eye test. And we see it in the NFL, right? We got instant replay in the NFL, which is taking every frame of every play during a replay and micromanaging it and almost questioning what is reality. And I'm going to get into this as we kind of step away from baseball. You know, it's amazing that we've covered 40 minutes already. But I did want to touch on replay in the NFL because we're talking about the micro frames that are set in instant replay that's almost creating an alternative reality. When you're talking about the days before instant replay, you have the human element in there, and a referee or an official can make a decision that was honest and what they saw with their own eyes. And you know what? If you looked at the replay and the replay showed that person was wrong, you know what it proved? It proved that the official was human. And I understand we have to take advantage of everything that we have from a technological standpoint. It's important. It's important. If you can make a play right, why not use it? Unfortunately, replay in all sports has gone a little too far. I'm hoping, if it's not in the NFL, maybe in Major League Baseball, that we could start to look at replay and take advantage of the positives that it can do, as opposed to taking it all the way to the extreme and looking at every little micro frame and creating an alternative source of reality. Because that's what the catch rule has become in the NFL. He either caught it or he didn't. Now, if there is a micro frame that could be put out there that could show that there's a possibility that maybe the receiver didn't have control of it for 1/1,000,000th of a second, and you could catch that on a frame, then all of a sudden it's not a catch. I said before, I respect the rule, and I think that the NFL officials are doing a great job enforcing the rule. They're doing their job. But is it a little bit too much? That's my question. You're having games decided on not what used to be a catch, but we're talking about, does it have to be 100% of a catch? Or could it be 99.9999999% of a catch? Because that, in my opinion, should still be a catch. Once again, though, the way the rule is stated right now, the officials are doing a good job by enforcing it. But I think by enforcing it, it's opening up the discussion over whether or not the rule should be changed. And I'm not saying it's got to be changed completely. There's a word called reasonable doubt, and it's used in the court system. It's not used when we're judging whether or not players and athletes use performance-enhancing drugs. You know, if the general public thinks that you use performance-enhancing drugs, according to the general public, you did. But when I'm talking about reasonable doubt, does it exist over the course of sports? There is a chance that you didn't catch the ball. And if that chance is large enough, then it shouldn't be ruled a catch. And that's my proposal. That there has to be some objectivity to the rule. To say that, you know what, for 99.99999% of the opportunity he had to make a catch, he had it. So maybe it should still be a catch. Because there's been a couple instances where you could say it was a catch for about that percentage of the time. And I'm not talking about a ball being bobbled off your chest and hitting the ground and picking it up. But I'm talking about the vulnerability that a football player has when they're catching a ball near the ground. If the ball is getting close to the ground, there may be a chance that the ball may hit the ground while a receiver can still have what can be clarified as a catch. And I think it's something that has to be discussed. And we talk about all the advantages that we have with technology. There's a way we can determine that. There's a way we can use all the science and all the extra things that we have that we can use to our own advantage and just get it right. And that's what we need to do. Not just in football, but in baseball. The freeze frames are showing stuff that may not even really exist. And that's what we have to understand. Just because you could take a freeze frame of something in some inert state, there is some question over whether or not that inert state exists. Replay has become, in some cases, a false set of reality. And I think because of that, we're seeing games turn on calls that really shouldn't have been made, but are being made because there's too much technology. And I've said all along, what makes sports great is the balance of everything. The balance of the human eye. The balance of a human error. A human can make a mistake. Ask Don Denkinger in the 1985 World Series. Do you think he had money on the Kansas City Royals? No. Don Denkinger made a call that he thought was the correct call. But you know what? There was nobody there to overrule him. Don Denkinger felt terrible about that. Ask Jim Joyce on the Armando Galarraga perfect game. Do you think he wants to be known as a guy that cost the kid a chance at a perfect game when there's only been 27 other ones in the history of the sport? Especially talking about a kid that never had another moment in Major League Baseball, is out of the game within a year or two. A guy that deserved his Dallas Braden moment, or his Philip Humber moment, or his Len Barker moment. To not accomplish anything else in your baseball career and have a chance to do something that only 27 other pitchers have ever done in the history of the sport. That would have made his life. And he deserved it. Do you think Jim Joyce wanted that call to go that way? So replay in sports should be to keep stuff like the 85 World Series, the Don Denkinger Jorge Orta call, and the Jim Joyce Armando Galarraga perfect game call from ruining people's lives. And I understand the Royals came back in Game 6 and won that game. And they ended up winning the World Series, but it's not 100% guarantee that they would have done so had that call not gone that way. Now, once Jason Donald is called safe by Jim Joyce, you can't call that an error. You can't call it a fielder's choice. You have to call it a hit. There's no way to ever take that hit off the board. So when you're talking about replay, I'm talking about two extremes here. And there has to be at some point a common ground. Replay has to be able to correct the obvious wrong calls. And a lot of times it does. But when replay gets used in the other direction, when we're micromanaging every single frame over the course of a replay, it's creating a superficial world. It's creating an alternative game. It's creating another game that is completely different on a different universe and different coordinates for what's really going on. It's a virtual game as opposed to an actual physical game. Remember, there's still human beings that are playing these sports. Human beings that can make mistakes, but are only capable of doing what a human being can possibly do. So when we're taking digital replay and using micro frames that never existed by itself. In other words, if we ever asked a player that's catching a football as they're going to the ground to stop in a certain frame where a picture in replay is showing, they couldn't physically do that. When we're looking at a ball going into the glove and stopping it and stopping it and stopping it and stopping it, that cannot be reenacted. It's physically impossible. So there has to be a balance where we talk about the human element of sports and keep it human as opposed to making it completely digital. And I know there's some theorists out there that would love to see the National Football League, for its safety, become a completely digital game. But I tell you, I wouldn't watch it. It's played by humans. And we need to understand that it is a human game. And because it's a human game, humans are going to make mistakes. So can we use replay for what it was originally intended to do? It's to take the bad call that's obvious and change it. Get it correct. Overrule the Don Denkinger call in the 1985 World Series. Overrule the Jim Joyce call to preserve Armando Galarraga's perfect game. But don't freeze every single frame to a point where it can't be recreated or reenacted. There's no reason to do that. Once again, John Pielli, Pass Ball Show, happy to be here with you. I'll throw the phone line out there one more time. Anybody wants to call in, 732-364-3598. We'll be on with you for another 8 minutes or so as we talk about stuff that's going on in the world of sports. We talked about baseball, and now I want to talk about a point that I brought up yesterday. And I'll apologize if you happen to watch the end of my show yesterday on Facebook Live. I'm going to repeat what I said yesterday. Now, if you followed me on Periscope, this part of the show got cut off. So I wanted to make sure I made this point again. The holidays. Highest suicide rate in this country is in the last couple of weeks of December. And it happens because people feel that they have to spend, and in some cases they're spending money that they don't have. And I've said before that it's very important to have that conversation, that open-minded conversation, instead of that rhetorical, how are you? Fine, thank you. Talk to your friends. Talk to your loved ones. Make sure they understand that if things aren't going as well as they want it to, that it's okay and they have somebody to listen to them. And just as importantly, and I know it's probably too late for some people, don't spend money just because society tells you to spend money. You know, just spending a little bit of time with a friend or a loved one is way more valuable than the amount of money you could spend on a rhetorical gift. And I say rhetorical gifts because we've all been through it. We all give rhetorical gifts. We all give gifts to people that we feel just need a gift. We put the best thought that we could behind it, but we'll never really know what that person wants. So we get them a gift just for the sake of being able to say that we got them a gift. And if you spend a little time with them, number one, you may be able to get them a better gift next time because you might actually know them a little better. But it wouldn't be a waste of your $15 or $20 that you spent on being able to cross them off your holiday list. It's very important that we make sure we use the holidays for what they're really here for. And that's to spend time with your family, spend time with your friends, have an extra conversation with a good friend of yours. When you ask them how they're doing, make sure they really understand that they want to have a conversation, that they don't want to hear fine, thank you. And I'll tell you, if one more person, when I ask them how they're doing, says fine, thank you, I'm going to start cutting people off. I mean, to me, that's a sign that I really shouldn't be having a conversation with that person. Because that's what they really think of me. They think of me as fine, thank you. Which, by the way, for those of us and those of whom that say it, do you understand that you're insulting the person that's asking you how you're doing when you say fine, thank you? Saying fine, thank you is a sign that you don't want to have a conversation with that person. So you might as well say, it's not fine and not thank you. I don't want to talk to you. And I hope there's one person that's listening or watching right now that has a history of saying fine, thank you when they're asked how they're doing, that may really think into the meaning of what they're saying and the fact that they're insulting others when they're saying that. And if one person can stop, then I made my point and I'm proud of myself. We'll be back with you tomorrow right here on Periscope and Facebook Live. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll talk a little bit of NBA and NHL tomorrow. Tonight we got the Devils and the Rangers tonight. I think it's a good game to watch. You're looking at two teams that, if you remember in the late 90s, were both good at the same time. Certain parts of the 2000s, they were both good at the same time. But I'll tell you, thinking about playoff hockey that can include both the New York Rangers and the New Jersey Devils, that makes me want to watch hockey again. So hopefully, if you're you want to tune into that. Thursday night football. Is there even a game on tonight? I tell you look at Thursday night football, and I tell you, if there's something that should be forgotten about in the National Football League, it's got to be Thursday night football. And thank God there's no game this week. I mean, can the ratings of something be any worse for a league that is talking about billions and billions of dollars? I hope the NFL is doing at least having a discussion on eliminating the Thursday night games. Or at least from a safety standpoint, give the team that has that Thursday night game a bye the week before so they don't have to play on 3 days rest. But I tell you, we could really do without Thursday night football. Listen, thanks for tuning in. Be back with you tomorrow, 6 o'clock, right here on Periscope and Facebook Live. God bless you. And as always, I'll see you on the other side.